There are many academic studies looking at the effects of framing, and frequently in the literature you'll see studies of gain frames versus loss frames. I think it's one of the most studied distinctions in framing. And I'm going to tell you about 3 studies that have looked at framing. In the first study, the researchers found that when trying to persuade people to recycle more, if a message is going to emphasize the impact of recycling on the individual, how individuals' own recycling is maybe beneficial for them, it's actually best to use a loss frame. And I'll give you an example of the type of wording such framing might employ. By not recycling, you fail to preserve the health of your planet. That's a potential loss of not recycling. You fail to preserve the health of your planet, and in so doing, endanger your future. It is a loss frame about you, and in this context, that framing was effective. But if the message is framed in terms of the impacts of recycling on people in general, it's actually better to use a gain frame. And so here, the framing could be, by recycling, you preserve the health of your planet. That's a gain. So you preserve the health of your planet, and in so doing, improve not only your future, but also the future of your friends, family, and community. And so what this study showed is that gain frames and loss frames often depend on the presence of other types of frames. Here there was another frame that was either presenting the impact of recycling on you or the impact of recycling on you and people around you. And depending on which one of those frames you use, the loss frame or the gain frame works better. This just demonstrates a bit of the complexity that goes into deciding how to employ framing. It's not all that straightforward. There was another study that showed quite a similar effect. When messages about pro-environmental consumption focused on the effects on the individual, it was better to use a loss frame. And let me tell you how this study was set up. So participants first read product information emphasizing the green attributes value to consumer health. And so this presented a green consumer choice as having personal health benefits. And then they saw a negatively framed ad slogan, skip the eco-friendly air conditioner, miss out on green living. And they found that combination was effective, making it about personal health and the benefits of making green choices. Similar to the previous study, they also found that when a message emphasizes the impact on people in general, transcending the self, it's actually better to use a gain frame. And so I'll tell you how this was set up. Participants first read product information emphasizing the green attributes value to environmental protection. And the authors described that as a social benefit appeal, an appeal to all people, a benefit to all people. And then participants saw a positively framed ad slogan, choose the eco-friendly air conditioner, get green living. And so this was very much like the first study. Gain frames and loss frames can be effective depending on how they are paired with other frames. And in the case of both of these studies, that other frame had to do with self versus something bigger than the self. There was a third study that found, just as the first 2 studies found, that when an environmental behavior, in this case the choice to install photovoltaic panels on your rooftop, so solar panels, when that behavior was presented as having individual impacts, a loss frame was more effective at encouraging the behavior. And that's all they found. They didn't find any way to present a gain frame beneficially or in a way where the message would have the impact that was seen in the previous studies. But I want to tell you about this study because it was a field experiment looking at people's actual behavioral decisions. Let me tell you about it. So this study was published in Nature Communications, a very good journal, and what they did was they studied almost 27,000 individuals who visited the website of an online solar panel retailer. And the participants were presented with one of four messages. So they were randomly assigned one of these four messages. One of the messages said, if you install solar panels, you'll save an average of $813 per year. Now that's a message about you, the benefit to you, but it's presented as a loss frame because it's focused on the expense you will save or the cost that will be reduced. It is a benefit, but it is a loss frame because it's emphasizing the savings of a loss or the prevention of a loss. Do you see how that works? Other participants saw earn on average $813 per year. So it's the same idea, something about $813 coming your way or not leaving your way, right? But here it's about earning rather than avoiding loss. It's about earning. This is a gain frame. Other participants saw a message emphasizing the reduction of CO2 emissions. So CO2 emissions can be framed as a cost, and by getting solar panels, you avoid that cost, right? So that's another loss frame, but now it's about the environment and it's about something bigger than the self. And then finally, some participants saw a frame about generating clean electricity. And this is about creating something, generating, right? That's a gain. And it's about something more than the self. You're actually generating clean energy for other energy users. Right, so those were the four frames. And then what they measured, the dependent variable, they looked at each of these individuals who saw these messages. Did they fill out a request to receive a quote to have solar panels installed on their homes? Now that doesn't measure actual behavior, did they install solar panels, but it is an important key behavioral step in the direction of actually installing solar panels. And here's what they found. The message presenting the effect on the self as a loss frame, so self-loss frame, was substantially more effective than the other three frames, and the other three frames weren't really different from each other. It looks like they step down as we go to the right, but those weren't significant differences. But the save on average $813 per year was a more effective frame. Now, I should note, only a little over 5% of participants who saw that frame actually made the request for the solar panel quote. So it was still a small number, but it was significantly more effective, and this was shown in a real-world setting. Now, why did that frame have the effect it did? Well, one simple explanation is that when people think about installing photovoltaics on their roofs, the first thing that comes to mind is probably, how much is this going to cost me? Not how much CO2 am I going to reduce, not how much green energy am I going to generate. People, I'm sure, have those thoughts, but that's not the most salient thought. The most salient thought is, what's this going to cost? Can I afford it? And because they're fixated on the cost, and because humans are naturally loss averse, the loss-framed message ends up being more effective. And I thought that was a nice compliment because it shows that outside of a research laboratory, when people are making real behavioral decisions, sometimes the choice of a frame is actually quite simple, that reflects rather simple considerations that people have. Thanks for watching.